Yesterday, we learned that Moshe, was a different type of a soul. It was a different type of a soul than everybody else. He came from a totally different order of creation. And we explained that he came from what was called TOHU. And this world is what's called Tikun. Okay, so let's understand this a little bit. And we will understand it now. The Rebbe is going to explain it. And that's what we're going to learn today. We're going to deal today with these Kabbalistic ideas of what is Tohu and Tikkun and what does it got to do with us. But just a short overview of what's going on over here. God created the world, right? Created the world. So here we have this tremendously complicated world. And the Torah actually expects us to believe that this whole entire thing with all the details is all created by God. Right? It's all created by God. So let's just say for now that God created it 5,000 years ago, or 5 billion years ago, 5 trillion years ago, or whatever it is. Nevertheless, he created it. Right? He created the world. The Torah says, especially the way the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, very convincingly explains that the world was in fact, that God started this whole thing of time and space and people 5,781 years ago, 82 years ago, 82 years ago, and soon it's going to be 82 and a half years ago. That's when he started the whole business. Okay, so you can ask the question, why did he start this whole thing at all? Why did he do it? So the answer is to put man in. And when man is in the world, and so man has this thing of making free choices, and when he does that, that makes real reality. So to speak, before man was created, there was not real, true reality. God did not get any pleasure from the world, whatever that means, but that's it, right? God does exist. This is our faith. This is what we believe. Here we see a world. Here it is. Here's the world. And we say that God created the world. We also say that God creates the world because time is also a creation. So it's not that God created the world in time. It's that time itself was created. So what existed before the world? It's impossible to explain, but what existed before the world was, if you want to call it true reality, but that wasn't really true reality. True reality is when man is in the world and he makes the right choices, that gives God pleasure. That's a thing, so to speak, that God did not have before. Okay, we can't get too, what do they call it? Anthropomorphic? Is that what the right word? I don't know. We can't, let's not get too simplistic over here, because it sounds like, Greek mythology or something, that God is this big figure sitting up and he enjoys. But nevertheless, that's a fact. God created us in his image, in the same way that was God's will. So we see that God has will, and that God also gets pleasure. Okay, but that's not the topic here. That's not the topic. Here we're talking about how the world is created in such a complicated way. So many different types of minerals, plants, animals, fish, bugs, humans. That's only the physical world. Then we got the subatomic levels. Then we have the planets, the constellations. That's still only part of the physical. Then we have all the spiritual levels that the Kabbalah talks about. These different worlds with angels, with levels, with revelations. This tremendously complicated world. Tremendously. Every single detail, tremendously complicated. Just take one bug from, anywhere. It's got its own respiratory system and endocrine system. And if bugs have endocrine system, I'm no expert in bugs. But I imagine that they do, and they have their own reproductive systems and their circulatory systems. So every bug is tremendously detailed in how it works. And all this amazing, incredible detail, we say that God is creating every single instant. Excuse me one moment, excuse me. Tremendous detail. How does all this detail come about? What's going on? How does it happen? So, one second. We're not finished. We said that the main reason that God creates the world is so that man will have free choice, and God put the Torah in the world, and that man will choose the right thing, which this is against human nature very often, right? Human nature is, what do I care who I marry and what I eat and what I, just whatever I want, whatever sort of turns me on, that's what I should do, right? I mean, isn't that what life is? No, that's not, right? You're not supposed to do it. A non-Jew is not allowed to eat a limb taken from an animal before it died. How does he know if it was taken before it died or not? So look into it, find out. What do I care? What do I care? You should care, because that's what God cares. And God gets pleasure if you do what he wants. Not the same thing as the Jews, but nevertheless pleasure. What do we care? What type of it is? You do God's will. So it says there was a whole system of creation in the world before the physical started, before this order. And that was called the system of TOHU. And that was the system of I do what I want. I do what I want. So to speak, a system where there's where you choose what's wrong, right? You choose to have the direct, what's wrong and what's right is the same thing. No good, no bad. That's where all these evil Haman, Hitler, all these people, that's where they come from. This level of Tohu. Tohu is pure egotism. Pure egotism. And that's what Tohu is. Tohu. When it's in its source, this pure egotism is wonderful. All you want to do is what's right. You're purely egotistical, purely you realize God. Nothing will move you from godliness, nothing whatsoever. Everything is pure. But as this Tohu comes into the world, as then this pure egotism becomes very, very confused and can do exactly the opposite of what God wants. And that's where you get Haman and these evil people, that they are against the Jews. Because the Jews, they represent what's called Tikun. The Jews, they represent doing what the Torah says, fixing yourself up, doing what God wants and not what I want. An alternative to egotism, right? An alternative to addiction and depression and aggression. An alternative. That's what Tikun is. Tikun is think for a minute, fix yourself up, do what the Torah says, don't do what you want. But Tohu says, go for yourself, do whatever you want. So in its source, this Tohu is very, very good. And that's the source of individuality and separateness and identity. That's good. And as it comes into Tikkun, though, there's what's called harmony. There's harmony. So it says Moshe, he is pure, comes purely from this level of Tohu and its source. This level of Tohu, as it is in its source. Purity, pure feeling of godliness. That's how it is. When this Tohu, it says there was a breaking of the vessels in this world of Tohu. God wanted it to break so that it would come into this world. That's all this diversity and this confusion comes in the world is from the breaking of these vessels of Tohu. There's a lot of my morning that talk about the subject, because that's essentially what our purpose in this world is to what's called raise these sparks up, put the puzzle together, put it back together, reveal the true power of Tohu, but in a good way, put it like Moses did. That's what Moses wanted to do. Okay, so that's what the Rebbe says. Moses, he was drawn from a different eon. It doesn't mean in a different eon, a different period of time. And this was before there was time. This is a different order, a different arrangement of the 10 sefirot called Tohu. Pure 10 sefirot. Okay, so let's go into this. Maybe we can understand this. Well, I haven't to understand, I have the difference between Tohu and Tikun. Now, this is going to get a little bit Kabbalistic over here. but it's worth it. It's worth it. First of all, it opens up our eyes to know that there is more to this world that meets the eye. Right? There's more to this world. And also it lets us know that there's a system, that God has a system to the world. And there's not only just, how do you say, a spiritual, but also a godly system. This is all what God wants, this whole entire system that we're going to talk about now. And as complicated and as amazing and mystical and whatever we want to call it, it is, right, as Kabbalistic as it is, this is just a drop in the bucket to tell us how great God is. This comes to only so that we should appreciate God. That's why we learn all these Kabbalistic ideas, so that we'll have a better appreciation, a deeper love, a deeper awe of God, a fear of doing what God doesn't want us to do, right? Because God is so infinitely good and wonderful. How can we do something against God? You know, we're not talking about punishments or reward. That's also true. There's also punishments and rewards, but we're not talking about that now. Let's appreciate the creation. Not only did God create the stars and the skies, also these spiritual levels, and then there's the source of the spiritual levels. That's from this level of Tohu. And if you read, there's Maimonim, especially of the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, that talks about levels which are above Tohu and what the source of those are. Okay, let's go. I have the difference between Tohu and Tikun. The difference between this level of Tohu, which we said are 10 pure aspects of God called the Sfirot, 10 pure aspects, each one separate from the other. And Tikun, which we said Tikun is harmony. Nothing is pure anymore. Everything is mixed in. Everything is harmonized. You do, it's known, the Eitz Chaim, from the book Eitz Chaim, a Kabbalistic book from the Arizal. Shetohu loya bechinas partzufim. That in Tohu, there was no what's called partzufim. Partzufim means basically, partzufim means faces, but it's much more than that. A partzuf is a complete system. A complete system. What does it mean? Here we have now in this world here we have in this world there's no such thing as real purity in this world. But in this world, there's no really such thing as purity, as actually being pure. There's no pure. Everything that there is has something else mixed into it. In Tohu and Tikun, in the world of Tohu, it wasn't that way. In the world of Tohu, everything was pure. There was only 10 Sfirot. Each sphere was pure Chesed, pure Gevura, pure Tiferes. According to one place I read that each one of these spheres was composed of the other 10, because everything has to have 10 Sfirot in it, but there was no further development. And there was kindness was pure kindness. Gevura was pure. This was Nekudas. Everything was like a point. What does it mean? Nekudat Chesed. There was one point of kindness. Nekudat Gevura. There's one point of Gevura. In other words, everything was independent, total independence. All the 10 Sfirot were totally independent one from the other. I know. Shalom nechalkol Sfirot pratiot. They were not divided into details and sub-details. Ba'orach v'rochav, in length and in width, just one point. B'derech chalali, in a general way, v'kitzur muflag. Let's take an example, an animal, right? A dog is only a dog. You'll never find a dog that acts like a cat or acts like a bird or acts like this, right? A monkey, unless you train it. Part of the nature of a dog is that it can be trained. But by its nature, a dog acts purely like a dog. It barks, it doesn't go meow, right? It goes into garbage cans. That's the way dogs are. Birds act like birds. hawks act like hawks. There are some animals which it's possible to teach them. Some animals which are, because that's their nature. Their nature is like dogs, they go in packs, so they go after a leader. So you can become the leader, right? Horses go in herds, so they go after a leader. So you'll be the leader of the horse. They're gonna but everything like an animal goes only according to its nature. It cannot change its nature. Why? Because it has no harmony with anything else. Everything is just its own thing. That's what it is, not which is not the case of human being. A human being, there's human beings that can act like dogs, cats, monkeys, right? The people can change their nature. A person can be cruel. All of a sudden, he can change his nature to be this. People can go according to values. They can go according to their intellect. Right? They can change themselves. They can articulate their emotions and their personalities and things like that. They can change. So people, that's something like tikkun. Animals are something like tohu. It's an example. Sometimes you get also a person, excuse me, people that they become mentally, emotionally, I don't know how to say politically correct, they go crazy. People that they, all of a sudden they go into the world of tohu, right? He gets depressed, you can't take him out of it. He gets angry, you can't get him out of it. He gets locked, and addictions is maybe the best example, right? He gets locked on something, you can't get out of it. That's tohu. That's tohu. There's no compromise. Everything, okay. So this comes from the spiritual aspect, which is called tohu. It was one point, b'derech chlali, in a general way. The kitzur muflag, or chesed, or kindness, this is gevura, severity. The gam also, hayu eser spheres, the 10 spheres were one underneath the other in the world of tohu, that they were separated one from the other. Each one was pure, and each one had no connection with the other. That chesed was by itself, gevura is by itself, love is alone, the severity is alone. There was no connection one to the other. That's why they're called points. Nikudim, it's called points, which is not the case in the world of Tikun, who shenas sfirot, that all of the sfirot are made partsufim. Each sphera contains 10, and each one of those 10 contains 10, and each one of those 10 contains 10. In other words, there's inclusion. One can include, can open oneself up to the other one. There's options. There's options. A person can change his mind, change his nature, change his direction. And that's what's called partsufim. A whole entire gamut of reality is found inside of each. Each person is like a little world. That's not the case animals. That's from Chachma is a part. There is what's called a partsuf of Abba. Partsuf, it's partsuf of Abba means that it contains 10 sfirot, and 10 sfirot contain 10. And from the Vav Katsavos, from the 6 different directions, from 6 different emotions, there came a partsuf which is called Zer Anpin, which this is divided up. The Nischalko Sfiros, she's pashtu the prati pratim, that each one of these emotions has details and details of details. That's what's called, each one of them is 9 times 9. Each one of the sfirot is its own self, and there's 9 others. So each one is contained of 9 others. And in each one of this, so 9 times 9 is 81. And each one of this, there's what's called Rosh, Toch, Vasov, there's what's called top, middle, and bottom. That's 81 times 3. What's 81 times 3? 243. And there's the Hey Chasadim, and there's what's called the 5 aspects of kindness and love of God that makes them grow until it becomes Ramah Chevurim. That's what a human being is. He has 248 limbs. And so does God have 248 limbs. And that corresponds to the 248 positive commandments of the Torah. That's the world of Tikkun. The world of Tikkun means that everything is composed of everything else, is interlocked, interwoven with everything else. Bagam naaseh, he's kalus. There is an inclusion of one sphera with the other one. Hamashal, let's take an example. What is exactly? We talked about these Kabbalistic ideas. Kochos and Nefesh. For instance, the Ramah, Kochos and Nefesh, there's what's called 248 powers of the soul. That goes into the 248 limbs of the body. There's the power of seeing, which is in the eye, power of hearing, which is in the ear, power of deed in the hands, power of walking is in the feet. This is, excuse me, this aspect, this is how your soul expresses itself in different limbs, in different vessels. That's the limbs. But also we can find there's one power which includes all the details of the soul. What are the details? This is, it encompasses all the power of seeing and hearing and walking and action from the head to the foot. And what is that? Machshava, thought. You want to call it consciousness. Shaladam, of a person. Kanira balil, like we can see clearly. Shkasher yikava, when a person gets burned. Bitzipur raglov in his toenail. Targish, take if it immediately is felt, a machshava, the thought, at the cave, the pain became kishayirtza lenanea, when he wants to move his foot, he moves it immediately. Shiyalav machshavto. So we see that his thought includes all these different aspects of his body. Lananea raglo, as soon as he wants, you want to call his will, he decides that he wants to move his foot, immediately it moves. Raya, from this, we can see the machshava, the thought, a person's power of awareness, his what's called his thought, his mind, is existing in his foot also. But it surrounds over them. This, this idea of the power of seeing being put into the eye, the power of hearing going into the ear. This is like the partsufim of Yosher. That's what's called Yosher. Of Yosher is another name for Tohu. Shemislavish Bekelim, that each one has its own particular vessel, and that, like, for instance, intellect goes in the brain, and the hands goes up the power of action. Bechinas Tohu, that's the level of Tikun. The level of Tohu, this is like Igulim, this is surrounds, this is something like pure thought. Because this level of Tikun, it's divided into all these different details. Therefore, we found that there's something that's new inside of them that was not in the world of Tohu. And that is when they were one under the other. And that's what it says. A new thing that happens in the world of Tikkun that does not exist in the world of Tohu. In the world of Tikkun, it's what's called Nitz Techilas Ambasofa. That the lowest levels are the highest. We've talked about this before. In the world of Tohu, what do we say? Everything is separate from everything else. So in the world of Tohu, there's no, so to speak, high or low. Everything is separate, everything is divided one from the other. There's no interaction whatsoever, which is not the case in the world of Tikkun. There is a tremendous interaction. Because there's an interaction, so everything is interdependent. One depends on the other. From this interdependence, it comes out an interesting thing, that sometimes the lowest aspect can be essential to the highest aspect. And the highest aspect, without the lowest, it can't exist. What's an example? For instance, a person's feet. A person's feet has an advantage over the head. The head is the highest aspect. Feet has a higher action, is higher than thought. A person can be a big genius, that he can know tremendous, amazing things, and it could be that he can make a machine that does the same thing that he does. The machine doesn't have genius. The machine can't make new ideas, can't solve, new problems. A machine can only do what you put into it. A human being can make new ideas, all of a sudden, new things. That says right? So a human being, the ability of thought, that's the highest force, right? Right? And the machine is like nothing. It says, yeah, in a way, you're right. But in a way, you're not right. Because the greatest ideas, if they don't come to be real in the physical world, so they're nothing. And even more, when a person actually does things, that inspires his intellect. When a person is actually writing, or he's actually playing music, or he's actually doing something, then that brings forth new ideas that he didn't have before. That's the uniqueness of this world of Tikun, that the lowest aspect can somehow or other, demonstrate the highest better than anything else. That's what it says, niutz techilasam besofim besofim techilasam, that the beginning is found in the end, and the end is found in the beginning. Sheyesh maila besof, that there's an advantage in the end, which there's not in the top. In the world of TOHU, there's no such thing like this. In the world of TOHU, everything is separate. Pure, but I say no harmony. Only in this world, which is called Tikun, because there's this level of what's called partsufim. This is something like the powers of the soul. Powers of the soul in the body. That intelligence, melubish b'moach, is in the brain. Melubish b'moach is in the brain. Shabarosh in the head. Shehu ma'ula. This is the highest. Excuse me 1 second. Yeah. That this is the highest of the powers, the head of all the powers, the power of intellect. And afterwards, in the hands, there is the power of deed, to write, to draw pictures, to make things, to create things. Malachazuman. Shehu koach pachot. This is the lowest power, regarding the power of intellect. Shebamoach. And afterwards, we have the feet. The feet are even lower. And your feet, you're very similar to an animal, right? An animal's feet and human feet, they're not much different. Their function certainly isn't much different, right? But the hands already, like animals can't play the piano, they can't, make something very complicated. They can't do things that are complicated and intricate with their hands. But with your feet, everything is the same. And the feet is the power of the lowest power of walking alone. But if you just evaluate each one on its own, so what they are before they're in the limbs, Vada Yimso, you'll find that the power of intellect is much, much higher than the power of action, right? And the power of action in the hands, and especially in the feet. Because the power of intellect is higher and much higher than walking or something. But when the power of walking is put into the feet, and the power of deed is put into the hands, and the power of intellect is in the brain, in the head, then Yimso, we can find that there's an advantage for the feet over the head. How so? Sharia Raglayim, because the feet, they make the person stand up. They can take him to places, from one place to another. And this power is not in the head at all. True, the head can invent some sort of a thing that will move, but still, it's just simulating what the feet do. A complete person is that he has head and a feet, and the feet can do something that the head can't do. So we see that the beginning is really revealed in the end. And the end affects the highest. There's something good about the end that is not in the head. This comes by means of including the power in its vessel, etc. What is this like? This is the level of agulin to tohu and yosher to tikun. Okay. So what is he saying? God, before he created the world, everything was very pure. Everything was very separate. It was like points, or there's another way of saying it, same thing. It was like spheres, each one like a one ball inside of the other ball. Like you have each one inside of the other one. So each one is completely surrounds the other one, but they don't touch one another. That's called the world of igulim or tohu or nikudim. Same letters, they're points. Everything is separated. So pure, we have pure wisdom, pure intelligence, pure kindness, pure yosher of tikkun. In tikkun, no, the world of tikkun, this is sometimes called yosher. It's called straight. Sometimes it's called Kudim and Brudim, right? There's what's okay. It's called Yosher, it's called straight, and it's called Tikkun. It's called being fixed up, harmony, potential harmony. The Sham there in Tohu, all the spirot are one under the other. There is no partsuf. We said there was no interaction between them. Chesed did not have anything in common with Gevura. Gevura did not have anything in common with Tiferes, etc. Each and every one was separate. Okay, and therefore there was no such thing as that the end had something in it that the beginning lacked. That there was no contribution, no interaction between the 10 spirits. Although, but in the world of Tikkun, after God decided that he was going to make this world of Tikkun, fix up the world, make spiritual worlds. Tohu is above spiritual. It's a form of world that's, in a way, it's not even a world. It's above time. It's above the world of Atzilut. But the world of Tikkun, that there is in many, many vessels, that's why we see, like I said, all the diversity of this world comes from this. And a partsuf that everything includes everything else, azai then there was made zum mitzad a kelim sheyesh beregel ma sheyesh barosh, because God and because these aspects of tikkun they could be put into vessels, they could be used. It was usable, it was pliable, right? You could put chesed into a vessel of gevura, you could put gevura into a vessel of chesed. You could put kindness together with power. You could work together. Therefore. And they came out that the lowest now had something that the highest did not have, because there was high and low. In Tikkun, in the world of Tohu, so to speak, there was no high and low. Everything was just separate, one from the other. What we do is this: we can find that the end is in the beginning. That the beginning, in other words, needed the end. Shehu inyan mibali asher yimtza rosh v'sof. If so, in the world of Tikkun, it ends up that sometimes humility, take an example. Humility can be a higher aspect than genius. You can have a person that's a big genius, the highest of the high. But we had all these Maimonim about Yosef and Yehuda. That Yosef was genius, being high, being a king. And Yehuda was simplicity, humility. It says that King David, he was a king by virtue of his humility. It says that Moses took the Jews out of Egypt because he was the most humble person in the world, not because he was so great. If so, despite the greatness of King David and despite the greatness of Moses, nevertheless, they say the outstanding quality of both of them was the lowness that they had, the humility. There's something better in this. There's a Maila B'sof Masha'enu Barosh. This can also be understood in the commandments. Commandments. It says, Sheyesh Maila B'mitzvahs, there's something better about the commandments, that they are higher, more than the Torah. Right, that's what we had in the Maimorim with Yehuda and Yosef. Yosef was the thing of Torah, and Yehuda is more the thing of commandments. Shahari mevatlim Talmud Torah, because we can stop learning Torah in order to learning Torah. You're learning Torah in order to escort a dead person. Gam. So if so, that's a commandment. Also because. Also, it says that in order to, if there's to work, in order to take a bride and a groom to put them into the escort them to the wedding, is you can stop saying Kriya Shema, like it says in the Yanuka of a Balak. Okay, there's in the Zohar, it says there was the Yanuka, this child, and he met two great holy tzaddikim, and he said, I see that you didn't say Shema Yisrael today. They said, yes, because we were doing another commandment. We were helping a bride and a groom and to get married. So he said, good, you were right to do what you did, but nevertheless, you're missing Kriya Shema. You were missing that. Also says a positive commandment pushes away a negative commandment, like for instance, Mila B'Tzorat. It's forbidden to cut off, but it's called a blemish, which is called Tzorat. It's forbidden to cut it off because that takes away the sign of impurity. And it's necessary to have the sign. It's forbidden if a person does have it. But you can cut it off for the circumcision. If that happens to be in the place where in the foreskin, you can cut it off. And shatnez b'tzitzis. Okay, all this, it's forbidden to mix linen and wool together in a garment. But in order to make tzitzit, the garment of the tzitzit, you can mix them together. Okay. You have to look for the details in this because the blue string is always made of wool. And Asher calls all this is because there's an advantage in deed, which deed comes from netzach, hod, and yesod, the lowest aspect. That's like the feet, which is even higher than chachmei Allah, than the highest levels of wisdom. Therefore, even the simplest Jew that does a commandment without any intention, without any knowledge of the secrets inside of it, he just does a commandment because he knows this is what God commanded him by him. By the simple Jew, it's the same thing putting on tefillin as it is learning Torah, as it is putting on tzitzit. All the commandments are the same. Nevertheless, it could be this is more dear in the eyes of God than than the holy thoughts and emotions of the highest of the righteous people. Because there's a tremendous advantage in this level of tamchin doraisa, of those people with simple people that just support the Torah more than sometimes than the leaders of the congregation. Like we said about the foot is higher than the head. This comes from the world of Tikun. Okay, what's this got to do with Moshe? We're going to see. Because we said the beginning is in the end and the end is in the beginning. That's the level of Tikun. There's a lot of vessels. There's a lot of diversity. And because of these vessels, so we have this idea that the vessels, which are the lowest of the lowest, they have a greater necessity in some ways than the lights which are inside of them, which is not the case of TOHU. TOHU, there was so much light, there was very little vessels. There's no stressing on the vessels whatsoever. Okay, what do we get out of this whole thing? What does God want? God wants there should be a world. True that in the world there's a lot of secrets. True that the spiritual levels are infinitely greater and more impressive and more godly than the physical. But nevertheless, what did God want when he created the world? What does the Bible tell us? That God wants a world. That's the whole essence of Judaism, to stress the importance of this physical world, not how this physical world can get you into heaven or whatever. This is a springboard. That's true. It does get you into heaven. And it is a springboard, yes. But the fact is the essence, existence of this physical world, especially if used properly, is higher than all the spiritual worlds, because all the spiritual worlds basically represent this level of tikkun, harmony, order. And this physical world, this is a direct shot of tohu, from the essence of godliness, comes into this world. Therefore, because this world, this physical world, is part of the whole creation of this whole tikkun, so it has this aspect of the lowest can shine the highest. Now let's see. In order to understand, that's the level of, why do we say all this business, this whole thing about tohu and tikkun? To explain where Moses came from. Moses was from the first era. Namely what? From this order which was before time. Before this was drawn into the world of tikkun. And this came from what's called the level of chachma, which was seeing. Moses could see. Moshe said, it says, Vayar Reshit Lo. It says that Moses, it says God saw the beginning, showed the beginning to Moses. What does it mean? Therefore, when Moses saw the seeing of this whole world of tikkun, of atzilut, that he came down into it, And Moses saw Nius Techila Sofa.
Rabbi Bolton, there's something wrong. We can't hear you.
What?
There's something wrong on your settings. We
Really?
can't hear you.
Oh, that's the whole thing was like that?
Yeah, on and off, on and off. It's very hard to understand.
Oh,
when
really?
it's a signal problem.
Uh-huh. All right. 1 second. All right. I don't know if that's true. Okay, I'll check it out. Well, let's stop this because we're at the end of an idea now anyway, and we'll go back and now we'll learn the Dvar Malchut. Okay, we'll just take a break here. 1 second. And we'll learn the Dvar Malchut. Everybody else says it's okay. Everyone else says it's all right, Davi. But that's okay. Now we'll learn the Dvar Malchut because it came to the end of the hour anyway.
Okay, no problem, Rabbi, no problem.
Okay, good. Here we go. Now we'll learn